Hello guys, back with another video. This one will be about Death Knights tanking, and Death Knights are actually one of the best tanks in the game and also the most versatile. Basically, even if you didn't use any talents at all, you would still be a great tank because of some abilities that you already start with. So that is the Frost Presence, which increases the stamina by 8%, also the armor contribution from plate by 60%, and reduces the damage you take by 8%. Also, it increases your threat by a lot, and Icy Touch, which also generates a huge amount of threat when in Frost Presence. So Icy Touch actually gets 7 times more threat when in Frost Presence, but Frost Presence also doubles all the threat that you deal with everything, which means that overall Icy Touch has a 14 multiplier to the threat that it deals. And then also there are some talents that improve it even further. So we're gonna start with the talents. We're gonna go one by one. So what I mean by that is that we're gonna make a spec, so a talent build for each specialization. We're gonna start with the Unholy one, which is the best spell damage tank that there is. So it is very situational, but the bosses where it is useful, it is the best at it. And it also has some nice AoE threat possibilities. So first of all, there are some talents that increase either the damage or the critical chance of some of your abilities, like Plague Strike, Blood Strike, or Death Strike, which barely do any threat at all. So we're not gonna take any of these. The second talent, however, increases your hit with all spells by 3%. This is extremely useful for the Taunt that DKs have, which is Dark Command, but also for abilities like Icy Touch, because they actually function using the spell hit rating and spell crit and all that. And also Death Coil, which is also considered a spell. So this is very useful, and it will lower the hit rating we need from gear by about 70, something like that. Now the other talents, we're gonna put them in dodge. Even if dodge is not a priority, we are actually gonna fill this talent in, and then we unlock the next road. One of the most useful talents is the Epidemic. It increases the duration of Blood Plague and Frost Fever. Those two are actually the diseases that you have, and a lot of your abilities either do more damage or more heal, or obviously if they do more damage, they also deal more threat. So this is very useful overall. Now we did unlock the next row, however none of these abilities are actually useful to us. Corpse Explosion, even if it seems to be a very nice AoE ability, it is very bad for one simple reason. It uses and it needs a nearby corpse, and it doesn't work with mechanical or elemental corpses. So if you don't have any corpses around, this will not be available to you, and most tanks don't have adds around them, or they will not be right next to them so that they can actually suffer from the damage from this. So we're gonna totally skip this. Again, we have an ability that boosts the damage of Plague Strike and Scorch Strike, which doesn't affect our threat almost at all. Maybe like less than 10% of your threat comes from these abilities, maybe even like 1%. And then we have Necrosis, which also only boosts our auto attacks. So not very useful talents overall. So we're going back to the second row. Here we have a few talents that are useful. Morbidity is a very nice one. It increases the damage, but also the healing done by Death Coil by 15%, but also reduces the cooldown of Death&Decay by 15 seconds. So Death&Decay is a huge threat AoE ability, and reducing the cooldown from 30 seconds to 15 lets us use this ability twice as much. So it uses one of each of our runes, right? So we have 6 runes in total. It uses one of each, but for AoE pulls, whenever there's 3 or more targets, this is the best ability to use to pull threat off everything. Now the next talent we're gonna get is Unholy Command. It reduces the cooldown of Death Grip by 10 seconds. So Death Grip normally has a 35-second cooldown. This is basically your second taunt. This again is affected by your spell hit rating, and reducing the cooldown by 10 seconds can sometimes save the life of one of your party members, or even some mobs that are very nice to grip. There are lots of mobs that at some point you will want to pull towards you, and lowering the cooldown is very useful for those situations. Now we unlocked the next tier. The first talent reduces the stun and fear duration. It's not very useful, and it also increases the mounted speed. Again, not very useful. It would be useful in exploration situations, but most raids are inside of instances where the mount speed doesn't work at all, so it's not like it's gonna benefit you in any fights. This is a very bad talent overall. The next one is again a talent that only boosts your auto attacks, which are very little of our total threat, very close to 0%, maybe 1 or 2%, so we're not gonna take this one either. The last talent that we have in here, Night of the Dead, reduces the cooldown of Raise Dead by 90 seconds. So this is actually extremely useful, and I'm gonna explain more about this later. And also reduces the cooldown of your Army of the Dead by 4 minutes. So this is huge. This ability normally has a 10-minute cooldown, and while you are channeling this, you take reduced damage equal to your dodge and your parry added together. So if we were to use it right now, we would be reducing our damage that we take by 30%. Now that is a huge amount. It's a very good ability. It does have a very long cooldown, but there are some fights that would take more than 6 minutes, so it would be great if you would use it at the beginning of the fight at some point in the first minute, and then right at the end. There is something that I have to mention with this, however. The ghouls taunt everything except bosses. So if there is a fight where you should focus on something, these ghouls will taunt a lot of stuff around you, and the boss will not actually target you. This could actually be useful on some fights, because the ghouls will die instead of you getting hit, but on other fights it is very suicidal, because the boss might use an AoE ability or might get healed whenever it kills something. So be careful at which fights you are using this ability. It is a very powerful one, but it can also be very harmful to your group. So the next talent that we're gonna use is the Raven's Stat. It increases our total strength by 3% and boosts our ghoul by a bit. Now the ghoul part is pretty irrelevant, but 3% strength is pretty good for our threat as well, and also for our survival. I'm gonna show you later what I mean by that. We unlock the next row. Now from here, the first one is a pretty irrelevant ability. The middle one increases the attack power bonus of your spells by 4%. This affects Icy Touch. So this boosts all of our threat that we do with Icy Touch. So it's a very nice addition to our threat capabilities. Now that is enough to unlock the next row. So in here, the second talent is something very useful. It's Magic Suppression. It lowers the spell damage we take, the magic damage we take, by 6% at all times. In addition, the anti-magic shell, which is a very nice cooldown, absorbs 25% more. So it's a very nice buff to an ability that we will use a lot. As I mentioned, this tank is specializing to be immune or to reduce the damage a lot from spells. So now, another talent that is pretty good, but we're not gonna take, which is basically, it will convert the runes that we use either with Pestilence or Bloodstrike into Death runes. So when this talent is at full, it actually has a 100% chance of doing it. You can use Death runes for any ability. It counts as any rune that you want. But this talent, I don't consider it that good, simply because in order to use the blood runes for anything, basically, you have to use an ability first, and then it only converts one rune. We are gonna look at a different talent that works very similar to this, but is twice as good. So we're actually not gonna take this talent. You can take it if you want, because nothing else in here is really mandatory, but I'm just letting you know the impact that it has on your build is pretty small. So another talent that we're gonna take is Desecration. Plague Strikes and Scorch Strikes. We did mention earlier that we're not gonna buff their damage, but this is not about damage. What this does is that it slows the movement speed of everything around us when we use these abilities by 50%. And it does it for 20 seconds. So this is a very nice AoE slow. So basically, whenever we're fighting anything, if we use Plague Strike at least once, it will slow everything. So very nice whenever we have a boss or a fight where there are multiple adds, multiple mobs attacking us. Getting them slowed is very nice. Now, we already unlocked the next row. We get a cooldown here. It's a very nice defensive cooldown. It's 2 minutes. It places a huge globe around us, and it absorbs a lot of spell damage. So it also reduces spell damage taken by 75%, right? So that's 4 times less. And it absorbs, after it absorbs that amount of damage, then it will disappear. But it is a very nice cooldown. And again, because we're specializing to be very good against spells, this is one of the top priorities for us. Now, we have an additional talent in here that makes us to deal additional damage after blood strikes. Again, we're not gonna take this, it's not that useful. And then we have 4 more talents that we need in order to proceed to the next level. What I would suggest is to get the Improved Unholy Presence, which gives us 15% movement speed while we are in Frost Presence. So that's very nice, and it also lets us use a full stamina enchant on our boots instead of using the movement speed enchant. And then we need 2 more points, which will be Dirge. This increases the runic power we receive from Death Strikes and also Plague Strikes. So this is a very nice talent. this will basically allow us to use a lot more death coils, and I'm gonna talk about a very nice combo with this talent later. So now that we unlocked the last row, this is the last row that we're gonna take from this talent tree from Unholy. We are gonna take Bone Shield, of course. It's a very nice ability, and what it does is that it increases the damage that we deal, but also it reduces the damage that we take. So it has 4 charges, right? So basically 4 bones are swirling around us, and once every few seconds when we take a hit, one of those bones will disappear. So with in combination with this, the more avoidance we have, the better, because as long as we have at least one of these bones moving around us, we will take 20% less damage from all sources. So for example, if we have dots on us that keep damaging us, or if there's something on the ground, any damage over time effects will be reduced by this ability, and only direct damage will reduce these bones that swirl around us. So one more talent that we're gonna put in here is 1 point in Crypt Fever. We're not gonna fill this in, we just need 1 point because it causes our diseases to cause Crypt Fever, which is another disease. And you might think, well, what's the point of getting just 1 talent in here? Well, what does an extra disease do? Well, most of our abilities do either extra damage, or in the case of Death Strike, it actually heals us more. So Death Strike, whenever we use this, it heals us 5% of our HP for every disease. So having 3 diseases on the target will heal for a total of 15%. So if we use Icy Touch and then Plague Strike, normally we have 2 diseases. With this talent, we have 3 in total. So the healing that we receive from Death Strike, basically we get a boost of 50% to it. So it heals for 15% of our total HP. So that's a very nice boost to the healing that we do to ourselves. So that will be everything that we're gonna use in this talent tree. Now, something you could do, instead of taking the movement speed, if you don't like it, and the extra runic power from Dirge, you could take this blood talent, and then you will need 1 more talent somewhere. I would suggest going in Unholy Blight, and then removing the movement speed. If you only put 1 talent in the movement speed, none of these movement speed effects stack with each other. So if you have the enchant on the boots, it doesn't stack with Unholy Presence. If we have just 1 point in Unholy Presence, it doesn't stack with another buff that would give us more. So any of these talents, for example, there are some meta gems that also give you extra movement speed. Regardless of which ones they take, they never stack. So you either put 2 points in Unholy Presence or nothing at all. If you don't want it, you can simply go with the Boots enchant, which is only 8%, but it's your choice in the end. Now we're gonna go to Frost now. So actually, before I leave, there is 1 more talent that would be worth mentioning, which is Rage of Rivendare. If we would fill this in, it would increase our expertise by 5. It does also boost our threat that we do by a bit, but it's not worth putting 3 more talents somewhere in here, then 5 more talents on the next row, and then another 5 in it. That would be 13 talent points in order to get 5 expertise. So we are gonna come back to the expertise later, but for now we're gonna move into Frost. So the very first talent is something very important that all of the Death Knights should take, maybe with the exception of DPS, I think blood DPS, which almost nobody plays. So Icy Touch, when used, it reduces the melee attack speed of bosses by 14%. Filling this talent in reduces it by 6% further, which is a total of 20%. This is one of the main abilities that will increase your survivability. It's almost mandatory for this debuff to be active at all times on your targets, on either bosses or mobs, whatever you're tanking. So this talent is one of the mandatory ones for all decay tanks, and equivalent abilities are also mandatory for all tanks. So the next thing that we're gonna take from here is the Toughness, which increases the armor value from items by 10%. Now that's a very nice increase. All talents have this, so all tanks have this, and we are no exception. Now keep in mind, in order to get Lichborn, which is a very nice cooldown that makes us immune to Charm, Fear and Sleep, and also allows us to heal ourselves with Death Coil, we need 3 more talents. So if you're gonna take Lichborn, my suggestion would be to also take Runic Power Mastery. This is a very nice boost to your maximum runic power, which would allow you to get to heal yourself with 1 more Death Coil whenever you're using Lichborn, if you're gonna spam them one after the other. The other talent that you might consider is Icy Reach, which increases the range of Icy Touch by 10 yards. But we're not gonna take these yet. We're gonna go into Blood first, and we're gonna see what we have in here. The first 2 talents increase some of our runic power, but only when killing enemies, and it does give a very slow passive of 2 runic power per 5 seconds. This is very negligible. The next one boosts the critical chance of some of our abilities, but we're almost not gonna use any of these. Blood Strike would be the only one, and even that one is not really worth it. The last talent in here is a very good defensive talent. Basically, whenever we have both our blood runes on cooldown, it reduces the damage we take by 5%. This applies to everything and includes spells. So this specific one is again mandatory for all Death Knight tanks, and it's the only one that we're gonna take from the first row. Now on the next row, we're gonna start from the end. We have some damage that we deal with two-handed melee weapons. The reason I'm not actually gonna take this is because it's only 4%. It doesn't increase our threat by that much, especially because most of our threat comes from Icy Touch, and it actually limits ourselves to the type of items we can use. So I have a two-handed weapon in here. It is the a two-handed mace, but I can tell you now it's not that important to have a two-handed melee weapon. There is an exception to this, which is bosses that can parry haste. If you don't have expertise cap for parry, which is 56, that's a lot of expertise, then having 2 weapons will get you a lot more parries, and the boss will attack a lot faster and will kill you. But other than that, this talent doesn't actually improve your survivability, so it's not worth taking. Again, we have a talent in here that increases our runic power generation. It's not that important. The first talent increases our attack power depending on how much armor we have. Being a tank, we have a lot of armor, and attack power increases our threat that we do from everything, so it's a very nice talent to have, and it allows us to go to the next row. Now in here, Rune Tap is a cooldown that I always recommend, and I feel like all decay tanks should have this. It basically converts one blood rune into 10% of our maximum health. So very nice talent. It also has a 1 minute cooldown, but we're gonna upgrade it later. Now in Dark Conviction we're not gonna put points yet, but we are gonna come back to that later. Dathrion Mastery is a talent that I really recommend, and this is the talent that works similar with the one I mentioned earlier with Death runes. Whenever we hit an enemy with Death Strike, both runes turn into a Death rune. Now this is huge. So not only it turns one blood rune, most of the times the blood rune is actually gonna be used for something that uses a blood rune. So either Blood Strike or Blood Boil, or a cooldown like Rune Tap. With Unholy and Frost runes, it's not always the case that they will always be used for something like that. And especially if you have Rune Tap, and also when we have cooldowns that use one single rune. So like Bone Shield or like Anti-Magic Zone, they only use one of those runes. So we will use one or the other, and basically we are incapable of using a Death Strike anymore because it needed one of each, so one Unholy and one Frost. So by turning both of these into Death runes, we can then choose, do we want more threat? We're gonna spam Icy Touch. Do we want more cooldowns? We're gonna then use either the Bone Shield or the Anti-Magic Zone, or we're gonna use Rune Tap. So this talent actually gives us a lot more versatility compared to this Reaping one, and also it gives us double the effect, because with just one ability you get 2 Death runes, and basically in 3 seconds the amount of time you need to use 2 Death Strikes, you have 4 Death runes that you'll then be able to use for whatever you want. Now at this point we need one more talent in order to go to the next level. I suggest Dark Conviction. It increases the chance to critically hit with weapons, spells and abilities. So basically everything that we use. Now from here I would suggest to buff your Rune Tap. It doubles the health that it heals you for. So instead of 10%, it will heal you for 20%. That's a fifth of your health. And it also lowers its cooldown by half a minute, which means that you're gonna be able to use this every half a minute. This is extremely useful. Whenever the heal has any trouble healing you, just pop Rune Tap, and then half a minute later, sometimes even 3, 4, 10 times in a single fight, you'll be able to use it again and heal yourself some more. Now here we have Spell Deflection, which is a talent that I would categorize as Avoidance. Basically it gives you chance equal to your parry chance of taking less damage from a spell. Now because we already have 3 talents in Improved Rune Tap, we're only gonna put 2 of them in here, and it doesn't actually increases so putting more talents doesn't increase the chance to get more of these to pop, to reduce more of the damage from more spells, but from that spell that you're gonna reduce anyway, it reduces the damage more. So it's not that useful to reduce the damage further. It would be a lot more useful if it would give you 3 times the chance to actually get the damage removed, so reduced at all, right? But 30% less damage taken is pretty acceptable, and also this stacks with everything else that we have, so it's a very nice addition to our arsenal of spell survivals. And there is a very important talent on the next row which we're gonna take, which is Veteran of the Third War. This increases our strength by 6%. It also gives us 6 expertise, and it's also the only talent that DKs have that increase their stamina by only 3%. Again, this stacks with Frost Presence, which also gives us 8%. So in total this will be 11, and together with the Blessing of Kings from Paladins it will be a total of 21%. So now at this point we have 3 talents that are left. We're not gonna finish this spell Deflection. We are actually going to go back to Frost. We are gonna take this Runic Power Mastery and take Lichborn. So again, we're gonna take one more cooldown. If you don't want Lichborn at all, you could fill this in and have 45% less damage taken from spells. And then if you want Mark of Blood, you could also take the Mark of Blood talent from here. So this is a very long cooldown. It's 3 minutes cooldown. It's not that effective. There are some specific fights where it would help. Basically it puts 20 stacks on the boss, and then the boss, whenever it hits something, it will heal that target for 4% of its maximum health. Now 4% is not that much, so if we count all the 20 hits, it will be basically 80% of the maximum health. But there are a lot of bosses that will not hit once per second. So because it only lasts 20 seconds and it has a 3 minutes cooldown, this is not such a good ability to use. It's fine to take when you want to go further into the tree, but we're actually not gonna bother with that. And we are gonna just improve our maximum runic power and take Lichborn as well, and we're gonna learn those talents. Something that I would like to mention at Glyphs, very important, the Glyph of Dark Command. This is the Taunt equivalent. It boosts the hit chance with by 8%, which this again stacks with the talent from Virulence, which means that we only need 6% more to hit with all of our spells. And if we have also a Boomy or a priest, a shadow priest I believe, then we only need 3%, which is like less than 100 hit rating. But we are gonna come back to that later. Another very good glyph is Icebound Fortitude. Normally Icebound Fortitude increases the damage we take by only 30%, but if we take the talent, it gives us 10% more damage reduction. This is a very nice buff to that ability, and again I believe that all DKs should have this. And the last one is one additional charge to your Bone Shield. So normally Bone Shield only gives you 3 charges, so only 3 hits, right? So for 3 hits you're gonna get 20% less damage, but that gives us 4 bones in total, so 1 extra, and that could mean that you're gonna take 20% less damage for several seconds, right? So instead of this buff basically only lasting 5 seconds, it could add, depending on RNG, 2 or 3 or even 5 more seconds, depending on how many times the boss misses you, or you dodge, or you parry. So if we look also at the minor glyphs, we have Glyph of Raised Dead. It causes our Raised Dead spell to no longer require a regent, right? So a corpse. Sadly, there is no glyph or talent like that for Corpse Explosion, but what we can do with Raised Dead is we can actually summon it, and because of our talents, we can do it every 1.5 minutes. And then what we can do with it is we can use Death Pact, to sacrifice it, and it heals 40% of our maximum health. This cooldown is huge. So almost half of our HP. 40% is enormous. And because Death Pact has a 2-minute cooldown, basically with the talent in Night of the Dead, by reducing it by 90 seconds, instead of having a 3-minute cooldown on Raise Dead, what we can do, whenever you see that you have at least 40 runic power, just summon your Raise Dead and use Death Pact and sacrifice it, and half of HP is gonna be healed. And it only takes like 1.5 seconds to do this whole thing. So very nice cooldown there. And without this glyph, you would either have to carry the corpse dust with you everywhere you go, or you would need to have a corpse somewhere next to you so that it can disappear and give you that heal. Now, another very nice minor glyph is the Death's Embrace. Basically, whenever you use your Death Coil to heal, this includes healing yourself, you get 20 runic power back. So, because we increased our maximum runic power to 130, and because Death Coil normally only costs 40 runic power, with this minor glyph, while we have the Lichborn active, you can use 5 Death Coils in total. And depending on your gear, it can heal for anywhere between 2k HP to even more than 5k. So this is a very nice ability to use, especially if you are out of runes and if you have your runic power maxed out. You can definitely use that combo to heal yourself to full HP. And the last one is Pestilence, which just increases the radius of Pestilence. This is very optional, you can replace it with anything else you want. So just to recap, the most important part is your threat, but you're pretty much set. You have 3% chance to hit from the talent, 8% to your Dark Command from the glyph, and then in order to hit with your Taunt, you need another 158 hit rating. You should get expertise, but Death Knights are the ones that are affected the least by expertise, because most of our threat, more than half of our threat, if not 90% of it, comes from Icy Touch, which cannot be dodged and cannot be parried. Then again, agility does not give attack power, so it is pretty useless. It does give us a bit of armor and some crit chance and a bit of dodge, but it's not worth getting any agility at all. And we do have some Aoe skills. We have Death&Decay, which is a very nice ability, and with the talent it's only a 15-second cooldown and it has a 10 seconds duration, which means that we're gonna be basically spamming this whenever we have 3 or more mobs to take the threat off. And what you can do is that you can use Icy Touch, Plague Strike, and then Pestilence, and that would be your whole rotation. Yeah, so you start with Death&Decay, then you spread your diseases, and that's all you're gonna do when you have AoE pools. So after that we need the crit immunity, 5.6%, the same as every other tank, and we need 540 defense for that. You can see I have a bit more in here, and you actually get from the rune forging another very good reason to use 2 weapons instead of 1 is that if you put the Nerubian Carapace on 2 different weapons, you get 26 defense. Yeah, but if you only have one weapon, it's only 25. It's not a huge difference, it's a very minor impact, but usually one-hand weapons, there are a lot of one-hand weapons that give very good defensive stats to tanks, more stamina, more defense rating, or more parry or dodge. So it's always better to have 2 tanking weapons instead of 1 DPS weapons. There are almost no items in the whole game that are 2-hand and that are made specifically for tanks. So in order to get that, you would need 560 rating. Now next we have the Healthpool. Again, stamina gives 10 HP before buffs, but together with all of our talents and kings from paladins, we get 21% more HP from stamina. Next one would be armor, or damage reducing, and we have a 2% from the meta gem, and then we also have a lot of talents that reduce the damage we take. 8% from Frost Presence, 5% more from Blade Barrier, and then also 6% less spell damage taken, magic damage taken from the Magic Suppression talent. And then we also have the 6% for a total of 20% reduced attack speed from bosses. Now, something to mention is that decays actually do not have any attack power reduction talents. Every other tank, so ferals and also warriors and also paladins, have some sort of attack power reduction debuff. Decays do not. So you will need to have one of these in your party. It's not hard to get either a warrior or a feral druid, but it is something to keep in mind. And then at Avoidance, decays actually have a very nice passive, which is Forceful Deflection. It increases your parry rating by 25% of your total strength. So the more strength you have, the higher the chance that you will also parry. And then also the higher the parry chance, you will get the chance of reducing the spell damage taken from spells. So 30% again is more than enough, especially with all the talents that we already mentioned. So it's just something to mention, that the higher the parry, also the less damage we're gonna take overall from spells. And that would be it. So this is the best spell tanking spec in the game, and thank you for watching, and have a nice day or a good night wherever you are.